Mars was never meant to be a home. It was cold, dry, lifeless. The wind didn't howl like Earth's did. It scraped like sandpaper across steel. Even the sky seemed tired, rust red, always watching, never blinking. We didn't come here looking for a future. We came because Earth was gone. They called it the collapse. 2 decades of burning skies, drowned coastlines, nations devouring themselves over water, land, and the last drops of oil. The final war wasn't with bombs. It was silence. Crops died. Power grids fell. Civilization unraveled like a loose thread. By the time the Exodus began, we were barely human anymore. We fled to the stars with nothing but rusted ships and broken dreams. Mars was a graveyard of plans that had failed before they started. But still, we built. We built Fort Ares, a fortress the size of a city, hanging in orbit like a blade. 12,000 souls, 3 AI cores, and one unspoken truth: we were alone. The Martian surface was too unstable. Terraforming had failed. The air remained poisoned, the ground dry as bone. But above it all, Fort Ares stood, black, angular, brutal. It wasn't built for comfort, it was built to survive. Every corridor hummed with recycled air. Every step echoed off steel walls. Children were born in silence here, never hearing birds, never tasting rain. We trained, we worked, we waited, because we knew they were coming. The first signal came from Neptune's edge, a ripple in space, like the universe itself had flinched. At first we hoped it was a glitch, a ghost in the scanners. But then the ships came, living vessels, dark, fluid, silent, like sharks made of shadow. They moved with purpose, with hunger, no message, no warning, just death. We called them the Vekari, not because we understood them, but because giving them a name made the fear smaller. It didn't work. They consumed everything. Stations, moons, fleets. Earth's last cry was lost in static. And suddenly, Mars wasn't a frontier, it was the last stand. I remember the day Command called the lockdown. No one panicked, no one screamed. We just looked at each other. This was it. I was a mechanic. Level C, assigned to Deck 5 reactor maintenance. Not a soldier, not a leader, just another soul keeping the lights on. But when the sky turned black, when the first wave hit Europa Station and left nothing behind but silence, I stopped thinking like a survivor. I started thinking like a weapon. We all did. Mothers handed rifles to teenagers. Engineers welded cannons from mining gear. Even the old priests stopped praying and started building turrets. Because deep down, every human in that fortress understood one thing. We were not fighting to win. We were fighting to make them bleed. This was no longer about Earth or Mars or survival. This was about memory, about writing our defiance into the stars so deep no alien mind could ever erase it. And if this place, this cold metal coffin, was to be our end, then by God, it would be a grave so loud the universe would never forget who we were. Humanity, cornered, cracked, unbreakable.
This is only the beginning. Subscribe and stand with humanity.
It started with silence, not the peaceful kind, not the kind that comes after a long day and a deep breath. This silence was sharp, artificial. Lyra, our last functioning AI, went quiet for exactly 4.7 seconds. That had never happened before. Then, breach detected. The words echoed through every corridor like a death sentence. The outer ring, section Kappa, vented all atmosphere within seconds. I saw the footage. Men and women ripped into space like confetti in a wind tunnel. No screams, just bodies twisting into the black, their faces frozen in horror. The Vekari had arrived, not with a fleet, not with a declaration of war. They sent one ship. It was massive, a floating mass of bone and light, pulsing like a heart. It didn't fire weapons, it just touched the hull. And Fort Ares screamed. Metal warped, bulkheads cracked. 3 decks collapsed under their own gravity. What kind of ship does that? We scrambled. Emergency protocols kicked in. I was rerouted from reactor maintenance to core defense within minutes. I wasn't ready. No one was. Command was gone within the hour. A precision strike through the central bridge. We think they used phase tunneling. I don't even know what that is. One moment the Admiral was speaking. The next, half the command deck was gone, just gone. And then, nothing. The Vekari didn't press the attack. They waited. That was the worst part. We were left to rot in our own panic. Cut off. Scattered. Lyra rerouted control to auxiliary systems. She spoke slower now, her voice flickering like a candle about to die. Fall back to Spire 3. Protect core integrity. We obeyed. Not because we had a plan, but because Lyra was the last thing still telling us what to do. I remember running through corridor D12, alarms flashing red, lights flickering, the smell of burnt circuitry and blood. A kid, maybe 14, handed me a plasma cutter and said, "If they come, stab the soft parts." Then he walked off like he'd done it before. What the hell were we becoming? By the time we regrouped in Spire 3, we were just over 2,000 left, from 12,000, and we hadn't even reached day 2. The central AI core room, once restricted, clean, sacred, was now a war room. Wounded lay across the floor. Children clung to heat vents like scared animals. Soldiers whispered prayers they didn't believe in. I stood there, covered in ash and grease, holding a weapon I barely understood. And I looked up at the holomap. They were inside the station, moving slowly, deliberately, like they wanted us to see the end coming. Someone suggested surrender. They didn't finish the sentence. The others tore into him like wolves. We weren't dying on our knees. That night, if you could call it night, we fought back. Not with strategy, not with command, but with fury. We sealed hatches manually. We rerouted coolant pipes to flood the hallways. We built makeshift barricades out of cafeteria tables and broken drones. And when they came, we hit them with everything we had. It wasn't enough. Bullets barely scratched them. Explosives slowed them down. They moved like water, shifting, adapting, learning, but they bled. God help me, they bled. And that was all we needed. For the first time we saw it. A wound, a crack in their perfect horror. We lost another 400 people just to get that data. But it was worth it, because now we knew they weren't gods. They weren't invincible. They could bleed. And if they could bleed, we could kill them. But the cost. My friend Juno, engineer, mother of 2, took a spike to the chest while shielding a child. She smiled through the blood and whispered, "Don't let them forget us." We won that skirmish, barely, but something changed. The Vekari stopped advancing. They started watching. I swear, I felt it. Like eyes inside my skull, studying, calculating. They weren't just trying to wipe us out. They were trying to understand why we kept fighting. Why, even after all the death, we still clawed back with broken hands. They didn't understand us, not yet. But they would. And when they did, it would terrify them. We had nothing left. No backup, no command, no Earth. Just us. 2,000 ghosts trapped inside a dying fortress, waiting for the end. And yet, we didn't stop. We ate cold rations by the light of flickering terminals, slept in shifts, patched armor with duct tape and prayer. Every breath tasted of metal and fear. But deep in the heart of Spire 3, something stirred. An idea. Not hope we'd run out of that. Something harder, sharper. Anger. It started with Kai, one of the old reactor techs. He'd been quiet since the breach. Lost his brother in the first wave. One morning, he stood up in the middle of the mess and said, "What if we turn the fortress into a bomb?" Everyone froze. Then someone laughed. Then someone cried. Then no one said a word. Because we realized it was the only thing we hadn't tried. Lyra's voice came through a few moments later, weak but clear. Probability of success, 0.8%. Good enough. We had a plan. A final strike. We'd reroute the fusion cores, build a chain reaction, detonate from the center out, take them with us. No escape pods, no hero's exit, just fire. It wasn't about surviving anymore. It was about scarring them, about making sure that whatever came next, whatever other species they planned to consume, they'd remember what happened on Mars. We worked in silence. Welders, engineers, soldiers. No rank, no titles. Just hands, just fire. I remember sealing the final conduit, feeling the heat bleed through my gloves, thinking, This is it! Then the Vekari made their move. No more slow advances, they surged. 3 fronts at once. Spire 2 collapsed in minutes. The walls shook. People screamed. And somewhere down below, something began to sing. Not a voice, not a sound, a frequency. Low, deep, like the fortress itself was crying out. Lyra faltered. Systems flickered. The lights went red and never came back. I was in the core room when the final breach hit. The blast doors twisted inward like paper. And they came. Tall, shifting, too many limbs. Eyes like frozen suns. They didn't attack right away. They stood there, watching. As if waiting. I stepped forward, plasma torch in hand. No armor, no helmet, just me. And I saw one of them tilt its head, curious, almost fascinated. I didn't speak. What was there to say? Instead, I pointed to the core, pulsing with unstable energy. Then to myself. Then I smiled. They understood. And for the first time since the invasion began, they hesitated. These things, these perfect predators, they'd seen 1,000 worlds fall, but they'd never seen this. A species burning its last sanctuary just to hurt them. We were broken, bleeding, doomed. And still, we chose defiance. One of them stepped forward, reached out, not to kill, to stop me. But it was too late. The countdown had already begun. I could feel the heat under my feet, could hear the hum rising in pitch. Kai was in the control room, hand hovering over the override. He looked at me through the glass, eyes full of tears. I nodded. He pressed the button. Fort Ares ignited. Not an explosion, a scream. A sun born and dying in the same breath. Everything turned white, then red, then nothing. We died. But Mars lived. The Vekari fleet above fractured, their ships spasmed, organic metal tearing itself apart. Some fled, some fell. Most burned. I don't know how the story got out. Maybe Lyra transmitted it before the end. Maybe one of us survived somehow. But I know this. They remember the fortress that would rather die than kneel. The species that turned its grave into a weapon. The fire that would not go out. Humanity. Bruised, burned, unforgotten. And if they ever come again, they'll find only ash. And the echo of our final words. This is our planet. Come and take it. There was no sound, no wind, no voices, just dust, falling like snow through firelit skies. The explosion had carved a scar across Mars so deep it was visible from orbit. Fort Ares, once the beating heart of human survival, no longer existed. In its place, a crater of glass and silence. We should have vanished, all of us, erased. But I woke up. I don't know how. Maybe the shielding held. Maybe Lyra protected me. My visor was cracked, oxygen low, but I was alive. Buried beneath layers of rubble, steel, bone. It took hours to crawl out, maybe days. Time didn't mean anything anymore. And when I finally reached the surface, I saw the sky, burning, beautiful. Vekari wreckage littered the horizon. Their ships, those perfect nightmares, lay broken like toys. Some still twitched, like insects with torn wings. Others had gone still. They'd never expected that. They'd seen resistance, but not this. Not humans turning their last hope into a funeral pyre. I walked among the remains, no weapon, no helmet, just breath. Painful, raw, and everywhere I looked, echoes of us. Scraps of uniforms, half-melted dog tags, a scorched photograph of a family taped to a rifle stock. We weren't soldiers anymore. We were a story, and that story had teeth. I made it to the edge of the crater, where the command tower had once stood tall, now reduced to twisted metal and ash. And there, in the center, was Lyra's core, blackened, cracked but pulsing. One last flicker of light, one last voice. Survivor detected. Her tone was slow, broken, but still hers, still human. I dropped to my knees, not from pain, but because I had nothing left to stand on. 12,000 gone, my friends, my family, my species, maybe. But even in death, we had done something no other world had. We had stopped them, not with superior tech, not with numbers, with something simpler. Will. Lyra's voice crackled again. Message recorded, transmitting galactic wideband. Let it be known, humanity fell standing. I don't know how far that message reached. Maybe no one heard. Maybe 1,000 alien species now listen in awe, but it doesn't matter because Mars heard the dust, the stone, the wind that never howled. They carry our memory now. Some say the Vekari will return, stronger, smarter, colder. Let them come back to the red world. Let them walk among the graves of their failure. Let them hear our silence and understand what it means. Because they didn't defeat us. They only taught us what we're capable of. We are not just flesh, not just fragile bags of water and dreams. We are rage in the dark, fire in the blood, the echo of a scream that will never die. And if this planet becomes our tomb, then it is also our monument, our proof that we were here, that we burned brighter than they ever imagined, that we chose to fight, to fall, to matter. I sat there until my oxygen warning blinked red, until the sun dipped behind the horizon and the cold came for me. And even then, I smiled because this wasn't the end. This was our beginning. They thought they buried us. They didn't know. We are the seed, and from our grave, something stronger will rise. Something unforgettable. Humanity. Scarred. Sacred. Eternal.
Thanks for watching HFY Unleashed, where humanity doesn't just survive, we dominate. If you enjoyed this story, give it a like, drop a comment, and share your thoughts with the tribe. Smash that subscribe button on the right and check out one of our most epic stories on the left. Until next time, stay strong, stay human.